A trade balance is simply the difference between the value of a country's exports X and imports M of goods and services over a period, usually a year. It is part of the broader current account, which also includes net income, profits, interest and dividends earned from abroad minus similar payments made to foreign investors, net transfers, remittances, foreign aid, and other one-way payments. Mathematically, the current account balance CA is CA equals X minus M plus net income plus net transfers. If CA is positive, the country has a surplus. If negative, a deficit. Think of a household. Exports are like the money you earn from a side business. Imports are the money you spend on buying items from others. The net result tells you if your side business is covering your extra spending. Measurement is done in market prices, including taxes, transport, and insurance, and is usually expressed in the country's own currency or in US dollars for comparability. Statistical agencies compile customs data for goods and surveys for services, then adjust for price changes using price indexes to keep the numbers comparable across time. The national income identity shows how total production, GDP denoted Y, is allocated among consumption C, investment I, government spending G, and net exports X minus M. Starting from the definition of GDP as the market value of all final goods and services produced in a country, we can categorize the expenditure side of the economy. Consumption C, households buying goods and services. Investment I, firms buying capital equipment and households buying new homes. Government spending G, all purchases by federal, state, and local governments. Exports X, domestically produced goods bought by foreigners. Imports M, foreign-produced goods bought by domestic residents, subtracted because they are not part of domestic production. Thus, Y equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Derivation: start with the income approach. Y equals wages plus rent plus interest plus profit. By the principle of circular flow, every dollar earned is either spent on consumption, saved, or paid in taxes. The part saved S and the part taxed T together become investment I and government spending G. Adding net exports accounts for the leakage of money to foreign producers, imports, and the inflow from foreign buyers, exports. The identity holds by definition. It is an accounting identity, not a behavioral equation, but it is the foundation for all macroeconomic analysis of trade. Several forces shape whether a country runs a trade surplus or deficit. Relative price elasticity. If a country's goods become cheaper relative to foreign goods either because the exchange rate falls or because of lower production costs, foreign demand for its exports rises, price elastic demand. Conversely, domestic consumers buy more imports. The Marshall-Lerner condition states that a depreciation improves the trade balance when the sum of export and import price elasticities exceeds 1. Factor endowments. Heckscher-Ohlin. Countries abundant in capital will export capital-intensive goods and import labor-intensive ones. The opposite holds for labor-rich nations. For example, Saudi Arabia, oil-rich, exports petroleum and imports food and electronics. Terms of trade. This is the ratio of export prices to import prices. An improvement: higher export prices relative to import prices raises national income without increasing volume, creating a surplus. A deterioration does the opposite. Think of a farmer who gets a higher price for wheat export while the price of tractors import stays the same. The farmer's trade balance improves. Technology and productivity. More productive sectors can produce at lower cost, enhancing competitiveness. Trade policies, tariffs, quotas, and subsidies can artificially alter the balance. Real-world example. China's rapid rise in manufacturing productivity lowered export prices, while rising wages later reduced its price advantage, contributing to the narrowing of its trade surplus in recent years. The savings investment identity links the external sector directly to the domestic macroeconomy. Starting from the national income identity, Y equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M. And the definition of private saving, S, as income left after consumption and taxes. S equals Y minus C minus T. Rearrange the identity by subtracting C and T from both sides and using the government budget balance. G minus T equals the fiscal deficit surplus. Y minus C minus T equals I plus G minus T plus X minus M. Thus, S equals I plus G minus T plus X minus M. If we move the government sector to the left-hand side, net government saving equals T minus G, we obtain the aggregate savings investment identity. S minus I equals X minus M plus T minus G. In a closed economy with no government, T equals G equals 0, the identity simplifies to S equals I, meaning all saving must be invested domestically. In an open economy, any excess of saving over investment, S minus I greater than 0, appears as a trade surplus, X minus M greater than 0. Conversely, when investment exceeds saving, the country must borrow from abroad, creating a trade deficit. Analogy: imagine a community garden where residents can either keep the vegetables they grow, saving, or use them for other projects, investment. If there is more produce than can be used locally, the surplus is shipped out, exports. If they want to build a greenhouse, investment, but lack enough vegetables, they import seeds and tools, imports. The difference between saved and invested vegetables equals the net trade flow. The IS-LM-BF balance of payments model extends the standard IS-LM goods money framework to incorporate external sector dynamics. IS curve represents equilibrium in the goods market. Y equals C of Y minus T plus I of R plus G plus X minus M. It shows combinations of output, Y, and the interest rate, R, where investment saving balance holds. The net export component depends on the real exchange rate, epsilon, and foreign income, Y star. X equals X of epsilon Y star, M equals M of epsilon Y. LM curve represents money market equilibrium, M over P equals L of Y. BF curve, balance of payments, shows combinations of Y and R where current account balance plus capital account flow equals 0. Under a flexible exchange rate, the BF curve is upward sloping. Higher Y raises imports, worsening the current account, which must be financed by higher capital inflows, higher R. Under a fixed rate, the central bank intervenes, making the BF curve horizontal at the world interest rate, R star. Equilibrium is at the intersection of IS, LM, and BF. Changes in policy shift these curves. An expansionary fiscal policy shifts IS right, raising Y and R, which can worsen the current account, move along BF. A monetary expansion shifts LM right, lowering R, attracting capital outflows, worsening the current account under flexible rates. Exchange rate adjustments move the net export function, rotating the IS curve. The model thus captures how macro policy, money, and exchange rate regimes jointly determine trade balance outcomes. It is useful for MBA students to visualize trade balance equilibrium as a three-dimensional puzzle of goods, money, and external sectors. Explanation: exchange rate regimes determine how a country's currency value is set and how it reacts to market forces, which in turn influences trade flows. 1. Fixed or pegged exchange rate. The central bank commits to keep the domestic currency at a set price relative to another currency or a basket. When the domestic price of exports rises relative to imports, the central bank must sell foreign reserves to buy its own currency, supporting the peg. This intervention can cause automatic adjustments. A trade deficit drains reserves, eventually forcing a devaluation or a policy change. Example: Hong Kong's linked exchange rate to the US dollar kept the Hong Kong dollar stable, but persistent deficits required large reserve holdings. 2. Flexible floating exchange rate. The market determines the currency value. A trade deficit leads to more supply of domestic currency to buy imports, putting downward pressure on its value. Depreciation makes exports cheaper and imports more expensive, nudging the trade balance toward equilibrium, the Marshall-Lerner effect. Example: the Brazilian real's depreciation in the early 2000s helped reduce Brazil's current account deficit. Effect on trade. Fixed, less immediate price adjustment. The burden of a deficit falls on foreign exchange reserves and fiscal policy, for example, higher taxes. Flexible, automatic price adjustment via exchange rate movements, but can lead to exchange rate volatility, affecting investment decisions. Analogy: think of a thermostat. A fixed regime is like setting the thermostat at a constant temperature. You must keep manually adding or removing heat reserves to stay at that level. A flexible regime lets the temperature drift, and the system self-corrects when it gets too hot or cold, exchange rate changes. The capital account, or more broadly the financial account, records cross-border flows of financial assets, foreign direct investment, portfolio investment, loans, and reserves. These flows can offset a current account deficit because the balance of payments identity requires. Current account plus capital account plus financial account plus errors and omissions equals 0. If a country runs a current account deficit, imports greater than exports, it must finance that gap by net capital inflows. For example, foreign investors buying domestic stocks, banks lending to domestic firms, or a fall in foreign exchange reserves. Gross private capital inflow equals delta foreign assets owned by domestic residents minus delta domestic assets owned by foreigners. Official reserves. Central banks can use foreign exchange reserves to temporarily fund deficits, but persistent use depletes reserves and may force a policy adjustment. Real-world example. The United States has run a current account deficit for decades, financed mainly by high demand for Treasury securities from foreign governments, especially China and Japan. The inflow of capital keeps the dollar strong, which in turn influences the trade balance. Key insight for managers. A persistent deficit financed by short-term portfolio inflows can be risky. Sudden reversals, capital flight, can trigger currency crises. Long-term financing through foreign direct investment is more stable because it involves real asset creation. Analogy: imagine a household that spends more than it earns. It can borrow from relatives, capital inflow, or dip into savings, official reserves. Borrowing works as long as relatives are willing. If they stop lending, the household must cut spending or find new income sources. A persistent trade deficit can have several long-run macroeconomic consequences. External debt accumulation. To finance ongoing deficits, a country borrows abroad. Over time, the debt-to-GDP ratio may rise, increasing vulnerability to interest rate spikes or exchange rate shocks. Example: Greece's pre-crisis deficits led to unsustainable debt levels. Currency valuation pressure. Continuous demand for foreign currency to pay for imports can depreciate the domestic currency under a floating regime. While depreciation can improve competitiveness, excessive depreciation may fuel inflation, import price pass-through, and erode purchasing power. Structural deindustrialization. If a deficit reflects a loss of competitiveness rather than a temporary cycle, domestic industries may shrink, leading to job losses and a hollowing out of the manufacturing base. Policy constraints. Governments may need to tighten fiscal policy, raise taxes, or cut spending to reduce the deficit, which can slow growth. Alternatively, they may intervene in currency markets, spending reserves, or imposing capital controls. Positive aspects. Deficits can also signal that a country is an attractive investment destination, receiving capital for productive projects that raise future growth potential. The United Kingdom's persistent current account deficit has been financed largely by stable foreign direct investment in services. Debt sustainability check. Use the intertemporal budget constraint. BT equals 1 plus R times BT minus 1 plus X minus MT minus ST. Where B is external debt, R is interest rate, X minus M is the trade balance, and S is national saving. If the growth rate of GDP exceeds R, debt can be sustainable even with deficits, provided the primary balance government fiscal stance remains favorable. Analogy: think of a car that constantly runs on a borrowed fuel tank deficit. As long as the loan interest fuel cost is low compared to the mileage GDP growth, the car can keep going. If interest rises or mileage falls, the tank empties and the car stops. Managers must watch the ratio of debt to GDP, exchange rate trends, and the composition of capital inflows, foreign direct investment versus short-term portfolio to assess risk. Explanation. Sample exam question 1, calculating the trade balance. Country A reports the following for 2025 in billions of US dollars. Goods exports 250. Goods imports 300. Services exports 80. Services imports 40. Net primary income receipts minus payments plus 20. Net transfers minus 5. Calculate A, the trade balance of goods, B, the current account balance, and C, the implied net capital inflow if the capital account shows a financial inflow of 30 and the official reserve change is -10. A solution. Part A goods trade balance equals exports minus imports equals 250 minus 300 equals -50, deficit. Part B current account balance equals goods exports minus imports plus services, exports minus imports plus net income plus net transfers equals -50 plus parentheses 80 minus 40 plus 20 plus -5 equals -50 plus 40 plus 20 minus 5 equals +5. Surplus of 5 billion. Part C balance of payments identity. Current account plus capital account plus financial account plus delta reserves equals 0. Rearranged. Net capital inflow equals negative open parenthesis current account plus delta reserves close parenthesis. Here capital account plus financial account equals 30 given, delta reserves equals -10, reserve drawdown. So the net capital inflow must be 5 billion to offset the 5 billion current account surplus and the 10 billion reserve drawdown. The reported 30 billion financial inflow implies that 25 billion is net outflow after accounting for the reserve change, confirming the balance. Sample exam question 2, using the savings investment identity. Question: an economy has y equals 1,200, c equals 700, g equals 250, t equals 200, and net exports x minus m equals -30. Calculate private saving S, investment I, and verify that S minus I equals X minus M. A solution. Private saving. S equals Y minus C minus T equals 1,200 minus 700 minus 200 equals 300. From the national income identity, Y equals C plus I plus G plus parentheses X minus M close parenthesis leads to 1,200 equals 700 plus I plus 250 minus 30 leads to I equals 1,200 minus 700 minus 250 plus 30 equals 280. S minus I equals 300 minus 280 equals 20, which should equal X minus M. Indeed, X minus M equals -30, so there is a discrepancy. The missing 20 reflects a government fiscal deficit. T minus G equals 200 minus 250 equals -50. Adjusting the full identity, S minus I equals parentheses X minus M close parenthesis plus parentheses T minus G close parenthesis gives 300 minus 280 equals -30 plus -50 leads to 20 equals -80. Actually, we see that the simple S minus I equals X minus M holds only when the government budget is balanced. The exercise highlights the condition. Sample exam question 3, exchange rate impact. Question: country B has an initial real exchange rate epsilon naught equals 1.00 domestic price of foreign goods. The price elasticity of export demand is absolute eta x equals 0.8 and of import demand is absolute eta m equals 1.2. The government devalues the currency by 10%. Epsilon rises to 1.10. Estimate the percentage change in the trade balance using the Marshall-Lerner condition. A solution. Change in trade balance delta TB approximately equals parentheses absolute eta x minus absolute eta m close parenthesis times delta epsilon equals open parenthesis 0.8 minus 1.2 close parenthesis times 10% equals -0.4 times 10% equals -4%. Because the sum of elasticities open parenthesis 0.8 plus 1.2 close parenthesis equals 2.0 greater than 1, the Marshall-Lerner condition holds, and the devaluation improves the trade balance. The negative sign indicates the deficit shrinks by 4%. These questions test the ability to compute trade figures, apply the SI identity, and understand exchange rate effects. Core skills for any MBA graduate focusing on macroeconomics and international finance.